Every day, your mind is being shaped by repetition, by inputs, by the voice inside your head. And whether you notice it or not, you're being programmed. The real question is, are you the one doing it? Or is it the noise from the world, fear-based headlines, past criticism, unspoken expectations that's writing your internal script? Most people don't realize they're living on autopilot, following a narrative they never chose. That's not just unfortunate, it's dangerous. Because that narrative defines how you think, how you act, and ultimately what you become. This video isn't about hype or feel-good talk. It's a daily ritual, a mental reset. Here we break the old loops and install a mindset built on discipline, clarity, and quiet inner strength. You won't need permission to start over. You won't need motivation to stay focused. You'll learn to build yourself, thought by thought, word by word, action by action, and it all starts now. If you're ready to reclaim your mental code and stop letting the world program you, hit that subscribe button and join this journey with us. We build unshakable minds here, brick by brick. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What negative script have you been carrying that you're finally ready to rewrite? This isn't about waiting for a breakthrough. It's about becoming a breakthrough daily. Let's get to work. 1. Repetition is power, not boredom. Most people keep waiting for something dramatic to change their lives. They think it'll come from one big moment, one lucky break, one breakthrough idea that suddenly makes everything make sense. But life doesn't work that way. Not real change, not lasting identity shifts. What actually rewires your mind isn't adrenaline, it's consistency. Not a single breakthrough, but what you do when no one's watching. Not once, but daily. That's the secret no one talks about because it's not glamorous. But repetition is not boredom, it's brain architecture. Your mind is shaped by what it experiences again and again, and what you repeat becomes your reality. It's not wishful thinking, it's neurological conditioning. Every thought you entertain, every phrase you repeat, every story you tell yourself is wiring a pathway in your brain, making it stronger with use. If you tell yourself, "I always mess things up," enough times, your brain doesn't resist. It just builds the track. But if you say, "I'm building something powerful," again and again, with clarity and emotional intent, something shifts. The brain adjusts. The nervous system begins to accept the new code. And slowly, your identity bends toward that new internal script. We see this in real life constantly. You know that friend who always says they're tired, overwhelmed, unlucky? Watch their energy. Watch how they carry themselves, how they speak, how they show up in the world. That story, repeated long enough, has become not just a belief, but a lived truth. They're not faking, they're rehearsing. And the longer they rehearse the same lines, the harder it is to rewrite the role. On the other hand, there are people who don't seem particularly exceptional at first, but they do something different. They repeat something better. Every morning, they journal one empowering sentence. Every night, they reaffirm their purpose. And over time, their demeanor changes, their posture aligns, their eyes sharpen. You feel it when they speak, not because they've found themselves, but because they've practiced becoming. That's how mental clarity is built, not in leaps, in layers. Marcus Aurelius knew this. His meditations weren't books written for fame. They were letters to his own soul, reminders, repetitions. Stoic philosophers understood that in a world filled with chaos and noise, truth had to be repeated more than lies to stand a chance. Marcus wasn't writing to sound wise, he was fighting to stay aligned. And in many ways, that's what you must do today. Because the world is not neutral, it's noisy. It doesn't just whisper distractions, it floods you with them. If you're not actively choosing what you let repeat in your mind, the world will choose for you. And it will rarely choose in your favor. This is where discipline mindset training becomes not just useful, but necessary. You need to take charge of your daily mental rewiring. You don't need to wait for your emotions to align with your goals. You need to train them. Repetition is how you do it. It's how you reprogram your mind for success and abundance. It's how you shift away from negative self-talk, from brain clutter, from the false scripts that were never yours. You don't defeat toxic thoughts by debating them. You defeat them by starving them and feeding better ones instead. Slowly, daily, deliberately. And here's what most people miss. Repetition doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't even need to be seen. It just needs to happen. Quietly. Repetition is emotional discipline. It's how you build an unshakable mindset, not by force, but by exposure. The more you repeat clarity, purpose, and presence, the more they become your new emotional baseline. You are not your old habits. You are not your negative patterns. You are simply what you've been reinforcing. And the moment you choose to reinforce something better, you begin to break the old loop. That's the power of daily mental rewiring. That's what Stoic calmness techniques teach us. That growth isn't found in inspiration. It's built through structure. Through small, powerful rituals repeated again and again until your nervous system adapts. And when that happens, success and abundance stop being concepts you chase and start becoming identities you live. So no, repetition is not boring. It's not mindless. It's your most powerful tool. And the more you wield it with intention, the faster your life starts reflecting your inner shift. You don't need another plan. You need practice. And it begins with what you say to yourself today, then again tomorrow, then again the next day, until you forget the old script ever existed. 2. You are already brainwashed. The only question is by whom? You didn't wake up with a blank mind this morning. Long before you opened your eyes, your thoughts were already wired by repetition, by memory, by voices that don't belong to you. That inner script you hear, the one that says you're not good enough, you don't have what it takes, or you'll probably fail. That voice didn't start with you. It started with someone else. A parent who was always disappointed. A teacher who shamed your mistakes. A coach who only saw your limits. A culture obsessed with comparison. Over time, those outside voices became the background music of your mind. So when you hesitate, when you shrink, when you doubt yourself before even trying, it's not because you're weak, it's because you've been programmed. And that's the part no one tells you. You've already been brainwashed. The only real question is, by whom? This is not a dramatic exaggeration. It's a psychological truth. Your beliefs didn't appear out of nowhere. They were formed, passively, repeatedly, by what you absorbed. And now, those beliefs are driving your identity, your reactions, and your limits. You might think you're living freely, but if your internal dialogue still echoes someone else's fear, then you're not in control. You're still carrying mental clutter that doesn't serve you. You're still running code that wasn't written for the life you want. Think about it. Have you ever been on the verge of applying for a new job, starting a creative project, or making a bold decision, and suddenly you hear that voice, the one that says you're not ready, or you're too late, or you'll embarrass yourself? That voice feels real. It sounds like you, but it's not. It's a recording from the past, disguised as your own logic. And the more often you listen to it without question, the more it defines your identity. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. This is where the Stoic lens becomes powerful. The Stoics didn't deny that our minds are influenced. They simply refused to remain unconscious. Epictetus taught that it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of those events. And most of those interpretations, they were inherited. The Stoics called on us to take back that power, not by pretending we're unaffected, but by observing every belief, every reaction, every story, and asking, where did this come from? Do I agree with it? Does it serve me? If not, it doesn't deserve to stay. This is the essence of emotional self-mastery, not to control every thought, but to recognize which ones were never truly ours to begin with. Most people never pause long enough to realize they're living on borrowed thoughts. They're too busy performing identities that were passed down, not chosen. That's how generational fear survives. That's how insecurity is transmitted. And that's how people wake up at 50, wondering why they never lived a life that felt their own. They think they lacked talent or discipline. But often, all they lacked was awareness. The moment of clarity when they could say, this story I've been repeating, this fear I've been feeding, it doesn't belong to me. That's when change begins. Not when you add more, but when you start subtracting what isn't true. The truth is, if you don't take control of your inner script, someone else already has. If you're not curating your inputs, your mental framework is being shaped by default. By the news you consume, the people you follow, the comments you absorb, the culture you silently copy. And just like the body becomes what it eats, your mind becomes what it consumes. That's not philosophy. That's biology. Every thought repeated with emotion and frequency becomes a pathway. And every pathway reinforced becomes your default reaction. But here's the power. Just as your mind was programmed, it can be reprogrammed. You can begin to install new beliefs, ones that are grounded in strength, in intention, in clarity. Not fantasy, not blind optimism, but truth. Your truth. That's where the practice begins. Not with motivation, but with awareness. You must learn to pause when the old voice shows up. You don't argue with it, you don't hate it. You simply recognize it. Ah, there you are again. But I don't believe you anymore. This simple act of observation breaks the trance. And the moment you stop identifying with the old script, you begin to write a new one. Not with dramatic declarations, but with quiet, daily mental rewiring. You speak your own words, you hold your own standards, you live by your own values. That's how you reprogram your mind, not through effort alone, but through intentional self-talk, through repetition that serves your growth, not your fear. So don't ask whether you've been influenced. You have. We all have. The real shift happens when you decide to become the author of your own mind. That's not rebellion, that's responsibility. And every time you question an inherited belief, every time you choose clarity over noise, you're reclaiming the most sacred form of freedom, ownership of your thoughts. Because you were never meant to live in someone else's fear. You were meant to rise in your own truth. And that begins the moment you stop listening to the wrong voice and start writing a better one. 3. Curate your inputs like your life depends on it. Your mind was never designed to absorb everything. It was built to focus, to filter, to protect you from overload. But modern life doesn't respect that boundary. Every morning, before you even take a full breath, your attention is already under attack. Notifications pinging, headlines screaming, someone's highlight reel playing on your feed, someone else's opinion seeping into your thoughts before you've even had a chance to think for yourself. And you call it just checking my phone, just staying informed, or worse, just passing time. But that just is quietly killing your clarity. Because what you feed your mind daily becomes your baseline. Just like your body becomes what it eats, your identity becomes what it consumes. And in a world that profits from your distraction, your mental diet is either your anchor or your downfall. You may not feel the impact instantly. That's what makes it dangerous. You scroll through 30 videos, half of them comparing, the rest complaining. You laugh, maybe cringe, maybe feel nothing at all. Then you stand up and wonder why your chest feels tight, your thoughts are disorganized, and your energy is already drained. Your friend who watches that every day doesn't see the pattern, but you notice it. They become more reactive, more insecure, they complain more, they doubt more, they think it's just them, but it's not. It's the constant stream of psychological junk food being pumped into their mind and sold as entertainment. And if you're not careful, the same thing happens to you. Not because you're weak, but because repetition reshapes you, whether or not you're aware of it. That's the trap. Most people think they're immune to their inputs. They believe they can watch hours of chaos, drama, and superficial content and stay grounded. But the mind doesn't work like that. The mind adapts. It mimics. It absorbs without asking. And that's why mental clutter is so dangerous. You don't notice it until it's already become part of you, until your focus slips, until your anxiety spikes, until you start shrinking from your own goals and you can't explain why. But if you trace it back, it often starts with what you allowed in. This is why the Stoics were so ruthless about mental boundaries. Epictetus said it best: if someone gave you poison, you'd be angry. But when someone gives you mental poison, you swallow it with a smile. He wasn't exaggerating. He was warning. Your mind is not a dumping ground. It is sacred territory. It holds your focus, your peace, your inner compass. So ask yourself, would you invite someone into your home to insult you, distract you, pull you away from your values? Of course not. Yet you let them into your head. Through your screen, your feed, your constant scrolling every single day. And this isn't just about social media. It's about everything. The conversations you tolerate, the people you spend time with, the music you leave on in the background, the books you read or never read. Every input is a brick, Every brick shapes a wall, and that wall either keeps you grounded in purpose or traps you in confusion. Mental clarity doesn't happen by accident. It's built. And like anything worth building, it requires discernment. That's not rigidity, that's responsibility. You must protect your inner peace like your life depends on it, because it does. The world will offer you 1,000 distractions, and every one of them will steal a piece of your focus if you let it. But the real danger isn't just in being distracted. It's in being programmed by low-quality inputs until you think that's normal. Until you stop dreaming bigger, stop thinking clearly, and stop trusting your gut, because the noise has buried your intuition. So here's the practice. Start treating your mind like your most valuable asset. Curate your inputs, audit your content, choose your environment, replace toxic entertainment with wisdom, replace empty talk with intention, replace digital clutter with a quiet space. Not because you're trying to escape the world, but because you want to see it clearly. You want to live on your terms, not on the terms handed to you by algorithms and advertisers. And the simplest way to begin is to ask, does this input feed my growth or drain it? If it's not helping you build the mindset you need, it doesn't belong in your mental space. This isn't about perfection, it's about power, your power to choose. Every time you scroll, click, read, watch, or listen, you're making a choice. You're deciding who gets to speak into your life. And that decision, repeated daily, becomes your internal environment. And when your internal environment is clean, focused, aligned, everything else follows. You gain mental clarity, you protect emotional stability, you think with intention, you live with direction. That's how you build a calm mind. That's how you cultivate real abundance. Not by chasing more, but by subtracting what's stealing your peace. Because your inputs matter, and if you don't control them, they will control you. 4. Discipline is love for your future self. Most people misunderstand discipline. They see it as cold, rigid, restrictive, something to endure, not something to embrace. But true discipline isn't punishment. It's love. Not the soft, emotional kind. It's a deep, grounded respect for who you're becoming. Every act of discipline is a quiet declaration. I believe my future self is worth showing up for today. That belief is the foundation of inner strength. It's not loud. It doesn't need motivation. It's rooted in clarity, in values, in the decision to honor your life even when it's inconvenient. That's the kind of mindset that builds abundance, not just financial, but emotional, spiritual, and mental abundance. Because when you consistently show up for yourself, when you act in alignment with your principles instead of your impulses, your identity begins to shift. And what once felt like effort begins to feel like integrity. You've probably seen this in someone you know. Maybe it's the uncle who walks every morning, not because he loves cold air at 6 a.m., but because he says, if I stop, I decline. Or the friend who cooks instead of ordering takeout, not out of restriction, but because he says, I want to fuel my body, not numb it. These people are not superheroes. They just understand something simple. Discipline isn't about deprivation. It's about direction. It's choosing discomfort now in service of stability later. And when that discipline is repeated over time, it becomes part of who you are. Not a task, not a rule, a standard, a rhythm, a quiet form of devotion. Stoic philosophy makes this truth unshakable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, just that do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. That line strips away the noise. It reminds us that discipline isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. The Stoics didn't chase rewards. They didn't rely on moods. They practiced what mattered regardless of how they felt. And in doing so, they became free. Free from chaos, free from impulse, free from being pulled in every direction. Discipline to them wasn't control for control's sake. It was clarity. It was the road back to inner peace. In a world addicted to ease, this kind of self-respect is rare. Everything around you is trying to convince you to indulge, delay, and give in. You deserve a break. You've earned this. But discipline says you deserve more than this moment. You deserve long-term mental clarity. You deserve emotional grounding. You deserve a mind that trusts itself. And the only way to get there is by earning your own trust. That trust is built not when things are easy, but when they're hard, and you still choose to act from intention. That's where identity shifts. That's how emotional stability is created. not by chasing motivation, but by committing to movement even without it. Here's the truth. The strongest people you know are not the most inspired. They're the most consistent. Their power doesn't come from willpower. It comes from structure. They've built mental pathways that make focus feel normal. And that structure starts with tiny disciplines. A morning walk, a few pages of reading, a phone was turned face down, a boundary was kept. These small decisions reinforce a mindset of responsibility, and over time that mindset becomes freedom. You're no longer a slave to mood, to distraction, to other people's timelines. You begin to live on your own terms, because you've built the habits that sustain your vision. And let's be clear, this has everything to do with abundance. Real abundance isn't about how much you have, it's about how stable your foundation is when the world shakes. Discipline builds that foundation. It strengthens your nervous system, it sharpens your thinking, it quiets the emotional noise, it allows you to move from survival mode into creation mode, from chasing to choosing, from reacting to responding. Discipline turns chaos into clarity, and clarity is the birthplace of all meaningful growth. So when you say no to that extra hour of scrolling, when you choose a routine over randomness, when you hold the line on your standards, not for applause, but for alignment, you are practicing something sacred. You are not being harsh with yourself, you are being kind. Because the most dangerous form of self-neglect is letting your future be dictated by your present weakness. But the most powerful act of self-respect is to say, I don't need to feel ready, I just need to start. Because the future version of me is counting on it. And that's the voice you need to amplify. Not the voice of guilt, but the voice of grounded vision. The one that sees through temptation and says, I know what I'm building. The one who chooses short-term discomfort for long-term peace. The one that trains your mind, not with force, but with repetition, clarity, and purpose. That voice doesn't come from nowhere. It's built day by day with every disciplined choice. And once it takes root, everything changes. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. That's what discipline really is. Love in motion. Not for who you were, but for who you're becoming. 5. Change starts with language. If you want to change your life, you have to change the way you speak to yourself. Not once, not occasionally, daily, quietly, repeatedly. Because the language you use isn't just describing your world, it's programming your inner world. Every word you say, every phrase you repeat, every label you accept becomes the scaffolding of your beliefs. Your brain doesn't filter sarcasm or exaggeration. It only recognizes repetition and emotion. So when you say, I'm so bad at this, I always screw up, or I'm such a mess, even as a joke, your nervous system listens. It logs it, and it reinforces it. What starts as commentary becomes instruction. And soon, your thoughts and actions begin to match that instruction. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. You've seen it happen. That friend who spills coffee and mutters, I'm an idiot. They don't think twice. But then the next time they're late or forget something, they say it again and again. Until, without realizing it, it becomes part of their identity. They don't need anyone to insult them. They're doing it on autopilot. Not out of hate, but out of habit. That's how language wires behavior. On the flip side, think of someone who says, I'm learning, I'm figuring this out, or I'm not there yet, but I'm moving. It might seem small, but that choice of words creates room to grow, to adjust, to improve. And that mental space, created entirely by language, becomes the environment where change can actually take root. Marcus Aurelius understood this long before neuroscience could explain it. His journals weren't written to impress or to teach others. They were reminders, anchors, realignments. He spoke to himself as a way to hold himself accountable to his values. He didn't wait for confidence to show up. He wrote to generate it. He didn't assume strength would be automatic. He summoned it with clarity. That's the Stoic method, using language with precision, not as a decoration, but as a weapon against distortion and self-deception. And that's what most people are missing. They're waiting to feel capable before they speak with conviction. But that's backward. You don't speak affirmations because you already believe them. You speak to them until you start believing them. Until your nervous system, exposed to enough consistency and emotional charge, begins to accept the new narrative as truth. That's not delusion. That's mental rewiring. The same way you were conditioned by negativity, you can recondition yourself with clarity, honesty, and strength. But it begins with your words. This isn't about chanting empty slogans or pretending everything's perfect. It's about choosing a language that aligns with who you're becoming, not who you've been. Saying "I'm resilient" doesn't mean you've never been broken. It means you refuse to stay that way. Saying "I'm focused" doesn't mean you never get distracted. It means you're training your attention back to what matters. Saying "I'm growing" doesn't ignore your flaws. It reclaims the right to move forward anyway. These statements, when repeated deliberately, become tools for emotional grounding. They give your mind something to hold on to when the chaos comes, and it will. Your inner voice is the most powerful influence on your behavior. It runs deeper than advice from friends, louder than critics, and more constant than any motivation video you'll ever watch. If that voice is judgmental, sarcastic, or rooted in fear, you will feel it in your body. Your cortisol rises, your posture shrinks, your energy drains. But when that voice is grounded, clear, and disciplined, your entire system stabilizes. You don't just feel better, you act better. You decide faster, you recover quicker. That's not just emotional strength, that's linguistic self-mastery. So how do you apply this? Start by listening. What do you say to yourself when you fail, when you're late, when you feel overwhelmed? Are those words something you'd say to someone you love? If not, they don't belong in your head. Replace them, not with fantasy, but with something functional. This is hard, but I'm learning. Today wasn't perfect, but I showed up. I've failed before, but I've also grown. These aren't feel-good lines. They're tools. Like bricks laid one by one, they build a new mental framework. One that's rooted in discipline, emotional clarity, and a calm mindset. Your language creates your emotional patterns. If you want to feel more grounded, speak in a way that supports grounding. If you want to rewire negative thoughts, start by eliminating the phrases that reinforce them. And if you want to build unshakable confidence, speak with the voice of who you want to be, not perfectly, but consistently. Because consistency is what transforms. Your brain doesn't need a dramatic shift, it needs a steady one. So stop waiting to believe in yourself. Speak like someone who does. Not because you're pretending, but because you're planting the truth, one sentence at a time. And over time, those sentences become beliefs. Those beliefs become behaviors. And those behaviors become you. Change starts with language. Say what matters, say it clearly, say it often, and watch who you become. 6. Clean your environment, clean your mind. Your physical space speaks louder than you think. Every time you walk into a room, your nervous system receives a message, either one of calm or one of chaos. And most of the time, you don't even notice it happening. The mess on the table, the half-folded laundry, the buzzing notifications from your phone, they don't just clutter your environment. They clutter your brain. Because your surroundings aren't separate from your mind. They are extensions of it. If the outside is overwhelmed, disorganized, and full of distractions, the inside almost always mirrors it. Mental clarity becomes impossible in an environment that breeds anxiety. And emotional stability doesn't grow in a space that constantly signals stress. You might think you're just used to the mess, but your subconscious is constantly working overtime trying to filter through that noise. No wonder you can't focus. No wonder you're tired without knowing why. There's a reason why cleaning your desk or organizing a drawer feels satisfying. It's not about the object. It's about the order. It's the moment your physical world finally starts cooperating with your inner need for alignment. A neighbor once told me, "I don't know how to meditate, but I clean my counter and suddenly I can breathe again." That's wisdom. That's clarity without needing a technique. You don't always need to escape to find peace. Sometimes you just need to put things where they belong. One drawer, one notification setting, one open window. These small shifts create silent signals to the brain. We're in control here. We are safe. We are focused. And the mind responds by calming down, by sharpening up, by returning to the present moment instead of being scattered in 1,000 directions. The Stoics knew this long before it became a trend. Epictetus wasn't a minimalist for the aesthetic. He owned little because he understood that excess isn't just a physical burden, it's a psychological one. When you surround yourself with clutter, you're not just creating visual noise, you're reinforcing a message. I'm not in command here. Seneca warned about the deceptive nature of luxury, not because wealth itself is wrong, but because dependence on it weakens the soul. You begin to believe that peace is somewhere outside you, tied to objects, appearances, indulgences. And when those things inevitably shift, you lose your grounding. That's why the Stoic approach was never about deprivation. It was about clarity. Remove the excess so your attention returns to what actually matters. Remove the noise so your thoughts can find structure. Remove the distraction so your identity can take shape. Your environment is a mirror. It reflects your priorities, your mindset, and your discipline. And the more you treat it like background noise, the more you reinforce the belief that your mind doesn't deserve intentional care. But the truth is, when your space is chaotic, your brain has to work harder to filter, to process, to stay calm. That's why a cluttered room often leads to a restless mind, while a clean room feels like an emotional reset. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about signaling to yourself that your energy is sacred, your focus matters, and your inner stillness deserves protection. This is not about building the perfect house. It's about creating micro moments of order that allow your nervous system to exhale. Maybe it starts with shutting off app notifications that hijack your attention before breakfast. Maybe it's clearing your work surface every night so your morning begins with clarity. Maybe it's replacing one screen-filled evening with soft light and silence. These aren't just acts of tidying up. They're habits of self-respect. Each one reminds your system that peace is available. Not somewhere far away, but right here. If you're willing to make space for it. And make no mistake, your environment affects your emotional discipline. When you wake up to chaos, it's harder to start your day with strength. When you try to focus surrounded by a mess, your mind resists. And when you attempt to calm down in a noisy, overstimulated space, your nervous system doesn't believe you. But when your space reflects calm, your body aligns. Your thoughts slow, your energy centers. You become grounded, focused, prepared. Not just because you cleaned, but because you reclaimed your authority over your space. That message echoes inward. I am not surviving the day. I am designing it. So if you've been feeling scattered, unfocused, emotionally tense, don't only look inside. Look around. What's the message your space is sending you every day? What does your desk, your room, and your phone say about your state of mind? If your environment is pulling you into disorder, then take it back, one quiet decision at a time. A clean environment isn't perfection, it's presence. It's a declaration, my peace matters enough to protect. When your space is calm, your thoughts follow. When your thoughts align, your actions strengthen. And from there, everything changes. You don't just find clarity, you live in it. 7. Identity is not found, it's practiced. You don't find yourself, you build yourself. That truth may be uncomfortable, but it's freeing. Because for too long, people have been waiting to feel ready, waiting to discover who they really are, waiting for some clarity to strike like lightning. But the Stoics knew better. They didn't speak of identity as something buried to be unearthed. They treated it as something sculpted, shaped daily by action, by choice, by consistency. Marcus Aurelius never wrote, "I am a strong man." He didn't declare who he was. He asked himself one thing. Was that the rational decision today? Because to him, identity wasn't a concept, it was conducted. And that's a philosophy worth living by in a world that sells self-discovery like a product. Real change doesn't come from insight alone. It comes from repeated action, from small moments when you could choose comfort, but instead choose alignment. From the decision to act in accordance with your future, not your feelings. That's how identity is formed. Not in dramatic epiphanies, but in steady, often quiet choices. Think of someone you know who used to be inconsistent, unfocused, and unreliable. Then one day they decide they're tired of letting themselves down. So they start running, 5 minutes a day. Not to lose weight, not to prove anything, but because they want to be someone who follows through. After 3 months, you notice they stand straighter, speak differently, and show up sharper. They're not pretending, they're practicing. And practice always leaves a mark. You can talk about your potential all day. You can explore your past, analyze your personality, or wait for the perfect job, partner, or opportunity. But none of it means anything until you behave like the person you want to become. That means waking up and acting as if your values already define you. That means choosing behaviors that reflect courage even when you feel doubt. That means keeping promises to yourself even when no one's watching, because what you do when no one is watching, that's who you are. Not the stories you tell, not the dreams you write down, what you repeatedly do. The Stoics were ruthless about this. They didn't rely on moods or motivation. They relied on discipline. Discipline was identity in motion, not rigid willpower, but grounded alignment. They believed if you wanted to be a certain type of person, you had to live as if you already were. It wasn't about faking it. It was about training your nervous system to expect what you intend to create. When you act from that place long enough, your internal language changes. I'm trying becomes I do. Someday becomes today. And that internal shift creates an external impact. Most people don't lack vision. They lack repetition. They think identity comes from a label, or a breakthrough, or the right personality quiz. But real identity is built through the pattern. Your mind, your body, your emotions, they all respond to repetition. Your nervous system remembers who you've been based on what you do often, not what you intend. So if you want to shift how you feel about yourself, stop waiting to feel different. Just start doing things your future self would do. Not perfectly, but consistently. And then keep going. Not because it feels good, but because it aligns. This is where emotional discipline enters. Your feelings will often betray you. They will whisper stories of fear, inadequacy, and delay. But those stories are not facts. They're just echoes of the old self trying to survive. If you wait for those voices to disappear before you act, you'll wait your whole life. The way out is not to argue with them, but to drown them out through action, through rhythm, through deliberate living. When you show up with consistency, those voices fade. And what rises in their place is something quiet but powerful: self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of true identity. It's not built in one moment of clarity, but in hundreds of moments where you kept your word. Where you showed up to the walk, the journal, the boundary, the silence. Not because someone made you, because you've decided who you are. And that decision, lived out loud, creates something no one can take from you: stability. That kind of grounded self-respect doesn't shout. It doesn't demand validation. It simply shows up. And that showing up, repeated daily, becomes your identity. So stop looking for yourself out there. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start acting like the person you want to become today. You don't need permission. You don't need more time. You need practice. Choose the words that version of you would say. Stand how they'd stand. Move how they'd move. Respond how they'd respond. And do it again tomorrow. Not to impress anyone, not to chase a label, but identity is not something you stumble upon. It's something you earn, action by action, breath by breath, day by day. And the more you practice it, the more real it becomes. Until one day, you're no longer trying to become that person. You are that person. Quietly, powerfully, unshakably. The most powerful transformation doesn't begin with noise. It begins with small, consistent decisions. What you think, what you say, what you allow in. Reprogramming your mind isn't about forcing change. It's about choosing your inputs, your language, and your actions with clarity and discipline. Every repetition reshapes your identity. Every moment of silence restores emotional balance. And every simple act of self-respect, waking up early, saying no to distractions, speaking with purpose, rewires your brain towards success and abundance. You don't need to search for your worth. You build it, thought by thought, step by step. Stoic philosophy reminds us that mental clarity, emotional strength, and identity are not found. They are practiced. So if something in this video spoke to your current season, whether it's the need to quiet your environment, reset your inputs, or reconnect with your deeper self, take a moment to reflect below. What's one practice you'll start doing every day to reclaim control of your mind? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. Share your journey, your struggle, or the insight that landed the hardest. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more Stoic-based tools to build your best self, quietly, powerfully, and deliberately.